craps out, we'll have somebody here that's running the meeting. And then can you make me a co-host? If you hover over my name more. There we go.
Who is the staff co-host for this meeting? Would that be Patrick?
Good question.
Patrick, is that you? If you can hear me.
And we're going live now.
I've done it in the past. I can be if need be.
Here's another way to ask this question. Given that this is the last meeting Communications is hosting for Place, who will be facilitating this?
Jared, do you want to jump in on this?
So council did approve that Monday night.
Yeah,
just
I did see that on Monday, that council did approve the change.
So we're live now, so nobody has to answer that question if they don't want to at the moment. But
I will have that, me and Carrie will have that conversation with Alex to determine what.
Sounds good. Is there public comment on this agenda?
There are two opportunities for public comment at the beginning and then at the end of the meeting.
And do you want us to facilitate that, or does one of you want to bring people in and out?
Let me see how many attendees we have. I mean, we have one attendee. I've done it before, so I did it on past Place meetings before, so it wouldn't be a problem to do it.
Well, why don't we do that, Patrick? Lasheen, if you can make Patrick a co-host. So Lasheen, you can see in the audience right now, we've got Sean Tubbs, local reporter. The other thing I do, Lasheen, is put it in gallery view, which it's in probably right now. If you click, if you pull up, you should have the participant list visible during the meeting.
Okay.
If you click on the three dots in the lower right corner, you can set it to follow host view. See that check mark?
I do not see that. Oh, wait, I do. It's checked.
Okay. So then if you switch, then your view is controlling the meeting. So up on the top right of the black window, it says view, and it's either speaker view or gallery view.
So don't change that.
Well, I do change it during the meeting if you want to have sort of a higher production values. So if you leave it in gallery view as people join, then the public can see who's coming into the meeting, the call to order. We put it in gallery view when they take votes.
Okay.
So that everyone can see that. We put it in gallery view when they take public comment.
Okay.
We're trying to make it as much like a real in-person meeting as possible in that way for the public.
Okay, so voting, gallery view, comment, gallery view, and then leave it speaker view.
And then if you put it in speaker view, Zoom will take over at that point and just do it based on people talking. Yep.
Okay, so it's fine right now?
Fine right now.
Okay.
And you can also go ahead and click the, there's a little up arrow next to share screen, and go ahead and allow all panelists to share their screens with this group. That's something they may need to do. Looks like you did it.
Cool.
Yep. And that just avoids the awkward, can I have permission to share my screen?
I
We're
know
doing a little training as you get your meeting started here, so thanks for bearing with us.
Sounds good. No problem.
Joe, are you still there?
I'm here, Lasheen.
How do I turn off, like my computer is dinging? How do I turn that off so it's not, you don't hear it throughout the meeting?
I did not hear anything.
You didn't hear anything?
I'll come show you that, Lasheen.
You know it on a Mac?
Are they notifications?
Yeah, like my
Oh,
text messages and stuff.
yeah, you need to go to your settings under notifications. So if you go to the Apple,
Mm-hmm.
which operating system are you running? Do you know?
Apple.
Well, are you on Big Sur yet, or do you know?
No.
Or, okay. So you should see notifications in the system preference guide. At least I do on my end. To the far right.
About system preferences? No. Because if I mute it, I mute the whole everything.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to system, if you're in system preferences, there should be a notifications icon.
Do you see that? Oh, I
And
see.
on, you see it? You click on that and it shows you everything that it's going to be. You could turn all of those off, all those, the app notifiers off.
Okay. How do I do that?
But really, Lasheen, if you just mute your mic, that should be fine.
Okay. Sounds good.
And we'll figure that out later.
Perfect.
So let's let them go ahead and start.
Okay.
And you can just mute and turn off your camera.
Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. I think it's 12:04. I think we're still not really close to a quorum. So let's see here. I see, yeah. So Cliff, Navarre, Lloyd, Rory. I think that's it so far. So we'll see. This could be a quick conversation potentially. Oh, there's Alex. Hey, Alex. I think, let's see. I could go ahead and just start the meeting in terms of public comments. Let's see. I don't know, can we, even if there are only a few of us here, can we take public comment and then kind of proceed?
The only thing we can't do is take a vote.
Okay. All right. Then I say let's begin and let's see what happens. So yeah, let's start our meeting. And I'd first like to open it up for any public comment.
If you'd like to speak at this time for public comments, please click the raise hand option on your Zoom toolbar, and I will bring you into the meeting. You have one person in the lobby, and that person doesn't wish to speak at this time.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. All right, so today's agenda, and I think this was originally something we were going to do in November, but the noticing got a little jumbled. So we got pushed back to December, was to actually kind of finalize what we think we want to do as a committee. And I think there's really only been one development since then, which is apparently earlier this week. I think it was done, the official transfer of place from City Council to NDS was accomplished. And so I think I just have one question about that, and then just general, do we have any comments about that? Is now that it's, reporting to NDS, does it report to you, Alex, or does it report to the Planning Commission, or both? Or how does that exactly work to report to a department?
It's to the director. I'm not sure it's reporting, it's
okay.
the arrangement, it's a committee that operates and will be coordinated by NDS and everything else that you used to provide to council comes to NDS. You can still do it if it's presentation, you can still make the presentation to council, but it has to be coordinated through NDS.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So I think that, you know, we can discuss if that, does that mean very much to you know, in terms of what we do? I mean, I think we're about to decide, and you know, you know, just to kind of tip my hat, I think what I've tried to do is, I hope, you know, kind of narrow it down to a few decisions we should make, you know, as to what this really will be going forward. Once we decide those things, yeah, absolutely, we can decide, how do we report? I mean, annual reports, who hears them, who gets a hold of them? Happy to discuss those things. But it sounds like, other than NDS being so responsible for us, so to speak, in terms of if there need to be replacements, it doesn't go to council, things like that. I guess, is there not that much of a change then in terms of mission from your point of view, Alex?
I'm not sure what the council didn't change your mission.
Okay.
You know, they just downgraded the level of the committee, you know, to be at the department level.
And if I might add a comment here, I would not want to characterize it as downgrading in any sort of a vaguely pejorative sense. Is more a recognition of the better place place to fit into any process. And it's not that we don't value the expertise. In fact, I'm impressed. I've been impressed during the year I've been with you all at the variety of expertises that you bring, and then how neat it is to bring all of those into one place. The problem that we've had from council is to figure out how you relate to NDS and how these things get funneled to council. And it just makes more sense, we think, if it gets funneled through NDS, so that when these kinds of issues come to council, they come with sort of the whole panoply of staffing. And that's really what we were getting at, not a sense of downgrading. That's the only thing I would add.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think that makes sense. You know, ultimately, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't really change our mission. And I think, you know, we still have learned very well that working with NDS is critical to being effective. So I think that's totally, from my point of view, I'm not speaking for anyone but myself, you know, I think that's reasonable. But I think that does bring us to this question, and I think we've discussed it a lot, and frankly, there aren't very many of us here, which may mean this is a sign, but I would say that, you know, ultimately we should decide, you know, we should make a few choices, and, you know, we could do this, you know, I sent out, just as a, you know, a preliminary, this kind of really short memo of a number of things that we had talked about, and tried to distill it into a set of actual options. And, you know, maybe what I can do is, I don't know if I have the power to share files, maybe not, maybe share screen or something like that. I'm not sure what the best way to do this is. But there are, you know, there's a question about our composition. Do we remain the way we are, as just one or two people across disciplines, or do we have, you know, basically a bench of people interested in different issues across the city who can become involved when, you know, when an issue that actually is relevant to them comes up that they think they can contribute to? We heard both things, and I think making that choice, I'm actually really intrigued by the idea of a bench instead of having just a people who are one of many who happen to be on place at this given time. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing is, what can we do? And I think this, in terms of our actual roles, we listed a bunch and we'll come back to those. This goes to our mission. And I think it goes to, to again, Alex and Carrie, of what is the pipeline for these things? How do we, if we aren't actively generating ideas to discuss, how are they coming to us? In terms of meeting schedule, we can just decide, does this remain a monthly meeting every second Thursday of the month, or is it based on need, with certain regular meetings at a certain interval, quarterly or bi-yearly, to review what's happening and to account for things? And then fundamentally, community engagement. How do we learn what the issues are? Are we just having our ears to the ground and picking the things we're interested in? Is NDS feeding them to us? Do we have our own community engagement processes? Those were some of the things we talked about. So that's just by way of, agenda setting. I think those are the things we need to decide. And beyond that, I mean, judging by who's here right now, I think, all of you had great suggestions. And if we were able to take a vote at this point, we could really change place in a significant way. But I don't know. I don't know. Do we want to dive deep into this? Do we want to just kind of make a holding action? I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this.
Let me first ask, do you want me to share the memo you wrote on the screen? Would that be helpful?
It. Let's discuss if we want, yeah, I mean, I think we ultimately maybe could, and it could be useful, but not at this, not just this second.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my 2 cents, we probably don't want to dive. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to dive too deep when we don't have a quorum, since
that's what
we can't actually take any action. But I guess my 2 cents, just out of everything, is feedback I've heard from people in the community is there are a lot of people with various technical skills, either architectural or even just even comp sci stuff, which, I mean, Rory does a lot of melding that with sort of the architectural environment, but also other aspects of city government. I've heard a lot of people frustrated, especially with the fact that the city often goes out to outside consultants for a lot of things that we have the resources and people willing to volunteer for in the community. Even if we had something like a right of first refusal for a project that was, maybe there are some projects that are too big for us to do on our own, but there are probably some smaller ones that we spend $250,000 on that we don't need to. And that might be something place could do moving forward as this sort of talent pool for the city.
Yeah. What do you think, Rory? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I totally agree that there are so many cases where we're like, oh, we have all these people, they're showing up and they want to help, and there just isn't an avenue really for them to help or to do anything or to use their expertise. And I think in some ways, even place as it exists now is not ideal for that, because I keep going back to this example of in MPO Tech, 3 months ago or something, we were having a discussion about prospective smart scale projects. And there was some guy in the chat who was like, I am a traffic engineer. This is what I do for a living. I would love to draw up some concepts for this intersection and do the calculations and tell you what the traffic impacts would be. And I kept being like, all right, staff, can we do something with that? And nothing happened. It fizzled out. I don't even remember that guy's name, and he's probably never going to come back. So, and that, that times every issue in the city. And so I think it's really important to be tapping into that expertise and to have a brain trust and, create, citizen advisory ad hoc efforts when they're necessary, or when it's beyond the scope of what staff can do, or even like beyond what staff can even really think about. But I don't think it can be a fixed like set of people, because then you're just trying to cram, whatever problem there is into their sets of expertise. And I mean, the other problem is like, right now we have 6 members of staff on this call, including senior leadership, for 2 hours. That is like not a great use of resources. But like obviously at some point, like staff needs to get involved, because otherwise you're just kind of screaming into the void, and like you might come up with brilliant ideas and then nothing ever happens because no one ever heard you, because you were just in a Zoom that no one was paying attention to. I'm not sure how necessary it is for staff to be involved on like a day-to-day, rather than as a like conclusion of a project. Like when we produce a memo and a recommendation where we, as whatever ad hoc or group it is, then have a mechanism that we can say, hey, let's grab some staff, and they can't just blow you off. Let's really talk about this. I do think that there needs to be a mechanism for that to like happen, not initiated by staff, right? Because like, staff, try not to use specific examples here, but they might be pursuing a project and it might be based on some flawed assumptions, and they may prefer to go with the default kind of low engagement and low decision path, which might not be the best for the city, but works for them. And, other people might point out those assumptions, but it's easy for them to ignore them and keep going down that path for another year or more until a critical global crisis throws the budget into turmoil and maybe throws it off the rails. See if anyone puts those together. Anyway, so the big recommendation I've been thinking about and want to toss into the pot for this meeting is there is the new Center for Civic Innovation right on 4th Street. The whole purpose is to be doing like cool, independent, civic innovation projects, right? To come up with better ideas about how to run the city and better. And it might be a good idea to move this brain trust under the auspices of CCI, which I think would both make it like kind of more, dynamic and able and nimble and able to like address problems differently from, just kind of doing whatever was directed, and kind of, self-create problem spaces. For example, like Code for Seville is currently under the auspices of CCI, and, their projects, which again are kind of ad hoc, whoever wants to join kind of organize, it's a mix of things people think of and like requests they get from like city departments. Like the fire department goes to them and is like, we want to map like response times to every address in the city. What does that look like? And they're like, oh, like we've got some GIS people and like, routing algorithm people, like let's put this together. Which when it's a city initiated request, obviously you have that line of communication open and that's good. When you don't, there still needs to be a way to grab staff's attention. And so that's my proposal. Not use 10 staff hours a month for it though.
So would Place then work as sort of an interface between CCI and the city government then, is what you're suggesting, Rory?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And I mean, I don't know, like, I kind of view Place, if you'd even call it that, as the, like, big, like, basically a directory of experts in the community and what they're capable of working on, what they're interested in working on, and then you draw from that directory for any particular kind of ad hoc project. And yeah, I mean, maybe Place as a committee serves as that like liaison. That would maybe make sense. I hadn't really thought that far. but because there probably does have to be some mechanism there, which maybe does involve like a committee type structure. But yeah, I mean, I was really thinking about it in terms of Andrew's kind of idea of like a knowledge base that we could draw from to form smaller ad hoc efforts.
Great. Well, yeah, I have some thoughts, but Cliff, I mean, I want to.
Generally, I think that the city's in kind of an anomic situation. There's very little that we can respond to at this point. I think there's so many different approaches and perspectives that could be valuable to the city, but the city's got to be in a context and in a situation where they're receptive to the information. And I just don't see that that opening there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just, I mean, the reason we're discussing this is because of that very point.
Yeah.
So you can lead a horse to water. I think there's great underutilized capacity on the committee, but I hate to see not only staff waste their time, but others could be doing just private side work that is equally productive.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. And I mean, I think Alex, and to everyone, and Lloyd and everyone, I mean, I think what you're hearing from those of us who are here today, I think there's a choice to be made. And would it be worth doing something radical, like putting place as a partnership, you know, between NDS and the Center for Civic Innovation or whatever it is, that, you know, fundamentally has the capacity to engage with large groups of interested parties and create like an ongoing structure where issues that arise come up. And when the city isn't feeling overburdened with just the day-to-day and says, we have an issue we need looked at, you can turn to place within a community structure and say, hey, place, can you turn to your group of experts? Because ultimately, place was only instituted because it was meant to be a place for people with expertise to advise the city. You know, I mean, otherwise, Planning Commission does the job of evaluating, you know, applications and developing the comprehensive plan. And, you know, staff ultimately does the actual, you know, approvals and deep analysis. So, or hires consultants to do it. So we're supposed to be local experts. And I think that it's true, you know, the tap of issues being brought to us has gone down to a trickle for whatever reason, if it's a trickle. And so, so I would say, is it worth trying something new and different and radical, especially now that it's not a council-led committee? I mean, NDS can kind of do things that maybe it hasn't done in the past. How does that sound?
Well, I don't, you know, we don't mind doing things that hasn't been done in the past, but we just want to, I don't want to see that. You know, if you guys want to take the initiative to create that, you know, fine. You know, but I don't want to see something that will become some kind of added responsibility. You know, we're trying to make place look relevant or
exactly.
You know, I mean, we don't want to assume that responsibility. You know, and if you guys that can be part of your discussion or analysis, you know, to try to partner with or being some kind of conduit between NDS and CCI or what have you, or even UVA, you know, for that matter, you know. And then if we have an issue that maybe staff cannot, not just NDS, maybe public works or what have you, or parks and rec, an issue we think we need some kind of outside input, you know, and then we can bounce it on you folks to take a look at that and provide some kind of analysis and recommendations, you know.
Yeah,
So that's certainly a radical departure from where we are right now. You know?
Yeah, which
So,
is not a bad thing.
yeah. So you guys, if I don't have a problem with that, but it needs to be something that wouldn't have some kind of added responsibility to where staff is right now.
I think that's what we're trying to do, is to make it something that can add value without asking, six city staff members to spend, that's 12 hours, just devoted to having a meeting that, frankly, there is no, we have not received any sort of, hey, there's something we need you to look at or something we want you to do. That hasn't happened in months and months and months. So, I think that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and Andrew, earlier you mentioned that, in this new scenario, like when staff didn't feel overwhelmed and felt like they had time to like deal with stuff, that's when they would reach out. But to me, I think it's really kind of in some ways the opposite. Like when I, privately, like at work, like if I'm delegating something or outsourcing something, I want that to be like, as much as possible, like completely hands off and self-contained, and like I give some person instructions or money and like they come back to me with a finished thing and I involve myself as little as possible. So like I really see it as, because staff is overwhelmed and has too much workload and can't handle it, like that is when you say, all right, if someone wants to work in this, like go ahead. I'm not thinking about this for at least the next year. Maybe I'll give you 3 hours in a year or so to think about it. And like from there, it needs to be like totally hands off. Like I think the reason we're not getting any assignments, or part of the reason is like, because giving us assignments as it stands now means not only all the staff time just to do the baseline place
Sure.
meeting every month, but also like, let's drag in, so-and-so from this part of the city and wherever, and all the extra staff resources to prepare us just to kind of like, talk about that thing for 2 hours. Whereas like, maybe we need to have some access, like grab the facilities management guy to talk about what the Market Street garage state is for a little bit, but then if you can remove all that other overhead, you can really reduce the workload on staff. And ideally at the end, you produce a workable solution. And at that point, maybe use some staff time to implement it if you can, or maybe even not staff time. Maybe it's like planning commission, or, I mean, that's going to involve staff obviously, but like, maybe it's like one work session with planning commission or council a year to present those recommendations, like specific, fully baked recommendations.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, ultimately, yeah, I think ultimately what can place do other than provide expertise is also be a clearinghouse for, somebody who's paying attention at all times to how issues have arisen and either have been addressed or haven't been addressed over time, so that there's some institutional or civic memory of the issues of placemaking that is on record. I mean, it just, because otherwise it's just not going to get, dealt with in a comprehensive way. It just doesn't, because we don't have that capacity in our city. Just in terms of, I don't see it on the website at least. And that's something CCI could actually handle very well through an organizing body that then has a base of experts associated with it. But, I think that gets to the point of not wanting to make more work for staff is exactly right. If that's what it is, I think, we already had one group peel off and decide to do this just as a private initiative, as an interested citizen initiative. We have a few options. I mean, one is that we just mothball place until such time as the city feels like it has value and there's capacity to. I'm just listing potential options. We just simply say it's a moribund community committee until such time as it adds value to what NDS needs from a group of experts. The other one is to actually reach out to Center for Civic Innovation, see if they're interested, and see if there's a new model that we could propose and that NDS and the city is interested in exploring this partnership, as long as, yes, it doesn't create more staff work. I hear what you're saying, Alex. And then the other is maybe something else that I'm not thinking of, and I'm not sure what that is, but yeah.
And
I guess.
the other thing I want to add is, Andrew, going forward, whatever we come up with, in whatever capacity place is going to be supporting NDS, the Planning Commission, and the city, or what have you. I like a place to generate like this is who we are. These are the areas we think we can provide services to the city, and because we've been focusing on NDS, but the issue of placemaking goes beyond NDS. You know, it includes public works. You will be amazed. Remember, the city has realigned the department, and now engineering, it's in public works. Traffic engineering, it's in public works.
Yeah.
So when you talk about smart scale now, you'll be talking about engineer. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Of
Very
course,
much.
you have a park and rec that acquires large properties and repurposes them for parks, trail system and stuff like that. You know, so once you have that, maybe 1 or 2 page document, you know, I would like for us to share it with all the department heads and say, look, some of them probably know that there is place, but I don't think that we have advertised it to the point where other departments is well aware that, hey, we've got this resource that supports city operations, and then we can use them. You know, whether it's in public utilities and park and recreation, public works, and what have you. So after this discussion, whenever it ends and we decide the new direction, you know, I think we need to do that.
That sounds great, Alex. And I think ultimately the best world, and you know, there's no promises that the best version of anything will ever happen, but I think that were it to be the best thing, it would be a two-way street, that the community would be able to bring their concerns that would then be picked up by experts, as well as the city saying, hey, look, good work is happening here. Let's also contribute to this, and that it becomes a really useful two-way street. Your point about that, yeah, right now planning actually, frankly, I mean, placemaking is now distributed across departments in a new way. And so I think that's extra reason to be thinking about how it, you know, having a good community organization like the Center for Civic Innovation that can facilitate engagement and also facilitate sharing might be, you know, a really useful partner in this kind of endeavor.
It might be a good idea to think about maybe having some meetings with them.
Yes. Oh, right. We wouldn't make any final decisions.
Yeah. You know, like a place, staff, and the representative from the city, which is staff, and then CCI, you know, to discuss opportunity.
I really like that idea. I mean, what do we all think? I mean, because obviously we don't have to, we're not, well, first of all, we can't vote on anything today. But on top of that, because we don't have a quorum, but on top of that, we would want to explore. I mean, we're talking about a possibility where it would be worth getting Lucas Ames and CCI to actually say, yeah, we could support that. And of course, on the city side as well, have you involved in those conversations to see how it could be something that's across government and community rather than in isolation. Yeah.
I think CCI is a good place to start. I don't think we should end there. Because I think, especially since Lena's not here, I can put on my community engagement hat for a minute. And CCI is definitely part of the interface to the community, but they're not the only one. And I think something that's come up a lot as far as the city, and this isn't really an indictment of staff, because I know that they're swamped and they're doing the best they can with limited resources, but there's not really a long-range planning mechanism for the city. I mean, we have our strategic plan and our comp plan, but those seem more like trying to catch up than actually think very far forward. At least that's my impression, opinions. But I think trying to be able to interface better with the city and the community and see where do we want to go. Talk to CCI, talk to the Food Justice Network, talk to more, because none of us have real community engagement chops. But if we're using this as sort of a brain trust, how do we reach out to the people who actually are embedded in the community and doing work in the community and build that bridge? Because my impression, at least a lot, is that a lot of members of the community don't feel like the city is listening to them or understands what they want, especially going forward. And one of the things that Rachel would talk about a lot is a lot of the time, the only mechanism people felt like was this thing is coming up for a vote at city council, so I'm going to go crush council, which is totally, I mean, that's part of the mechanism there, but we would have lots of projects that have been going for years or decades, and then at the last minute, the rug pulls under from them because all of a sudden someone's like, oh, wait, I didn't hear about this. And like, not to say we should never stop a project if it's a terrible project, because that should totally happen. But showing up at the last council meeting for a vote for the project should not be the only mechanism that people have. And I mean, we do community engagement to death, but obviously it's not working. Even though we'll run it out for years and years and everyone will say it's never enough. But to me, that seems to be more that we're doing it wrong than that we're not doing it enough. And I don't know what the solution is to that. That's not my specialty, which is why I think we need to find the people who are actually good at that.
I think there are some people in the community. I mean, I think CCI is a good example of people working towards that and using, and it's a technology oriented organization, but I don't think that's a bad thing. You know, I think, yeah, there are others as well, though. Absolutely, Navarre. And I think we can call them to the table. I mean, there's the Equity Center at UVA that actually is all about this, is all about community engagement around issues of placemaking and design and planning. And so I think, I mean, I work with them. So I think, you know, I think we can bring them into the conversation if we want to. We can do this in a number of different ways. I mean, the next place meeting, if we want to make that, it can be a conversation with exactly the people we think we need to talk to discuss what, you know, what might be a potential alternative future for place and get some expertise. I think that's entirely feasible. As you know, a next step. But anyway, I think these are great ideas, and I don't want to foreclose on the conversation at all, though we definitely don't need to meet for 2 hours today, everybody. But I would say that, I mean, just from my point of view, I really would love to find a new way to address the issues that Navarre and Rory and Cliff and everyone has already brought up. Those are the same, I share those issues. And I think beyond that, if it can't be made, and I want to pursue this path because I think it's a potentially effective path to move forward. Otherwise, I don't think there is much reason to utilize this venue until such time as it's, you know, is given purpose by you know, a new view from staff members or from council or planning commission. But certainly, I think we've tried generating our own ideas, and I don't think that actually works very well either. I think it needs to be from the community as well as from staff, and being a mediator between those things. And so, yeah, I'm speaking again, not as in any authority position, but just saying as a place member for a few years, this is the direction that I feel like might be workable to make the mission actually, you know, be something that could be, that we could actually accomplish the mission the place supposedly has. So I'm actually very positive and optimistic about this, but I know that leaves the current incarnation of place as basically, from my point of view, there isn't much for us to do. And Mark, you joined us while we were kind of chatting away.
Yeah, I've been at the risk of saying something redundant. I did want to just report out that I had conversations with other tree commission members, kind of let them know where things were going. Shared your letter with them, if that's okay. I hope.
Yeah.
And you know, generally, you know, our consensus has been, you know, that I guess we sort of believe that once upon a time, place was more wanted and more effective. And I think we sort of agree about that. And they said, relative to say dissolving, that it'd be a shame to sort of do that before we had the new NDS director structure and perhaps the resolution of this land use code audit thing that's being done by a private firm, which is sort of in the area where right now I would expect to see place be very active. Like if that wasn't happening and there was still we were still in the sort of throes of discussion with a council that had someone like, Kathy Galvin, who was engaged in a lot of this, notion that the zoning code should be rewritten, seems like a real core mission. It's an urban design group that's been holistic as opposed to being made up of specialized subcommittees. So I wanted to, at least assert, my position, shared by my colleagues on the tree commission, that we would prefer its mission to be more an urban design mission that's design centric, but cross-disciplinary and professional. I think sort of we were all sort of concerned about being a little bit laissez-faire and sort of going into a project saying, what does everybody think? And let's get another group of people together, as opposed to sort of getting ourselves in a position where we were much more kind of proactive, doing work outside the monthly meetings, but also kind of limiting that to something that's really doable so that we can be effective. So those are the thoughts that we had discussed. And so I don't know if mothball is the right word, but I understood it. I mean, I think that it may make sense for us to just pause and re-engage. And one other thought was, and you seem to be sort of talking about this because I'm not familiar with CCI, is, what other cities in Virginia or elsewhere have a place-like entity that's really effective, and that one of the things we could be doing, and I'm happy to participate in this or split up the task, once we identify those groups, I think it would be good for us to share among ourselves, how they operate, because knowing I'm familiar with lots of different tree commissions across Virginia, and their relationship to the private or public sector is very different, and their funding mechanism and what they do. And so there are probably a lot of different urban design entities in the state or elsewhere we might model ourselves on. Starting with Virginia, maybe.
Yeah, great. Yeah, those are good points. I think those are all, along the lines, but add extra dimension to what we've been talking about. And, but I think, calling some experts in and meeting with them, whether it's part of, I think, I really, for some reason, feel some compulsion to try to see this through, and that's why I'm here. I mean, just to see if what place is meant to be can actually be something of, can actually come to fruition. I feel some, personal compulsion to be part of this. And so, I will definitely take on some work of talking to some people to tell them about what we're doing. And ultimately it may be worth calling, a meeting to then hear what their thoughts are. But, ultimately, we, I don't think we should dissolve place right away for any reason. I think, Alex, I mean, you can think about this, but, this could be, just a particularly unusual period where, there will be new generated ideas. But even if so, I think what we're exploring is worth exploring. And then while we're waiting for things like things that change in the city, we can be researching new models for place at the same time, I think is a reasonable thing to be doing.
One public engagement process that I've seen that I think could be part of a model is Albemarle County's advisory committees. Each growth area has an advisory committee that has some expertise on it, but It's an interface with the community, with those growth area populations. And so when they do small area studies, it's an interface between the county planning staff and the community, basically to help resolve either technical issues. So you could have a place technical team that would address transportation or other type issues, and then just other public engagement components. But
just to piggyback on that for a second, I mean, I also wanted to just take a moment to say, you know, what my dream of what Charlottesville would have is very much what Chattanooga had once upon a time, which was a sort of more independent kind of public-private entity that was a studio that had maps and charts on the walls of ongoing projects, kind of like that, where and physical models of the city, and it allowed the public to just walk in and engage and see a representation of the city three-dimensionally. And at any project, whether it was a public project or a private project, you could see the context of the whole city. I would love to have a room in a warehouse somewhere that's an extension of NDS that sort of shows the whole downtown area as it's reaching out and allows everyone to kind of visualize what's going on. If I had the money, I would fund a big physical model, and that, you know, developers and neighborhoods could come together around the model and look at different proposals, or even have a proactive proposal that gets us out of being kind of reactive to some private proposal that comes in, or a funding proposal for smart scale, and then everybody's reacting to that. You know, I'd like a design-centric, proactive room where we could get ahead of everything and sort of see what we have on our hands, because it's very hard to visualize these projects. And I, you know, Navarro was just saying, you know, not as a kind of last ditch, not in my backyard protest at a council meeting, but like being way in front of it. Like you see an area and you say, this is what we want in that spot. And, you know, then you maybe engage with the owners of it, and then the development happens. That doesn't happen around here.
no, and I think you're spot on. Having a kind of a iterative shredding process in a studio format that was prolonged over time, so the public could come in and make comments or see what is going on and comment on it. It's a great way to build rapport with the citizens.
Right.
So I sent a link to chat that I think is what you are referring to, Mark, is the Chattanooga Design Studio. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Yeah, it does look pretty cool. And I do like the idea of an independent, you know, nonprofit type setup for that, with, you know, some engagement and interaction with the city. It looks like the city's a sponsor of them, but not one of the primary ones necessarily, or one of the primary ones, but not the primary sponsor, right?
Right.
And I think it's going to be really important, you know, as I see it, for this to be an independent effort that, you know, coordinates once ideas are fully baked with staff, and maybe staff can direct people to it prior to that, or direct ideas to it. You know, one thing I see with the citizen advisory committees in the county is that because, you know, they once had a clear purpose of, like, for example, the RIO 29 one of creating a RIO 29 plan, and now even to kind of help flesh out that form-based code. But they've also had scope creep where they've just become venues because they are a public meeting run by the government for people to come up who are members of the public to come speak at, where they're just venues for people to, when they see something in the general area that they don't like, to go to them and say, what the fuck, this is terrible. Like, you need to write a memo to say, we absolutely cannot have these apartments 2 miles away from, you know, our actual area. that we're covering, and then they do, and then the supervisors block the apartments, and it's just one more avenue for NIMBYism, which is, I think, the opposite. I mean, and that's not to say that there can't be constructive conversations and real, like, useful ideas that are come up with in a venue like that. But it's really, I think, important that it be focused and not allowed to become that. Separately, I would say the reason I'm suggesting CCI, and I have not interacted or asked them about this at all. So yes, they are, or kind of started as tech focused. They spun out of Smart Seville, but my impression of the reason that they are now a general center for civic innovation is the idea that it would become cross-disciplinary and take experts from kind of across the spectrum, depending on the project. And in fact, I think in a lot of ways, having a project with non-software experts on placemaking that then have the resources available of technical people who might also be kind of participating at the margins could be hugely helpful. And I mean, I love the idea of a giant model of downtown. That'd be super cool. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think it's important that in any future scenario here, that staff involvement, really starts to phase out and quickly, I think, and staff gets involved not for the sausage making, but for the rolling it into real policies. And I think, in terms of the comp plan and zoning rewrite, I definitely hear how, it seems to be within the scope of what place is tasked with. But at the same time, well, I mean, first off, I really feel like it's gone so far out of the hands of even the planning commission that we're not involved as much as I'd like. But there's also an ad hoc committee that now has 30 something people on it that's running that show, sort of, or something. And I mean, I personally think that's ridiculous. I thought place had gotten too big to have useful discussions as a committee without it just being going around, the circle. I have no idea how any committee with more than 30 people functions whatsoever. But, these aren't decisions I make. And I don't really see a lot of value in adding, another committee of 17 on top of that committee of 35 or whatever. Which is, again, on top of the 7 planning commissioners who are statutorily supposed to be in charge of the process, which is on top of the 5 counselors who have to approve it in the end.
Well, having been on the consultant side, that larger quantity leads to the consultant really just reporting out about their work and people nodding and trying to decide if they can interject. So yeah, for something like this, small is good, and getting ahead of the game is good, and reducing the amount of staff involvement while the sausage is being made is all good. So I support a lot of what you just said.
Yeah.
I guess I realized that I should probably disclose that I was a CCI fellow at the beginning of the year. So
okay,
I have taken money from CCI. So
yeah,
Corey's idea.
If there's other organizations that would work, that's fine by me too.
Right, and I think to that, I think what I'm hearing is that the mission of place is still important, and there's no doubt that the long range kind of place oriented, design oriented future of the city of Charlottesville is still massively in question, and it's still kind of out of control. So the issue's not gone, but at the same time, at least how this committee has been able to contribute to it has changed over time as the city has changed. And that to be able to have an engaged group of professionals providing advice, there might be new models that could work better. And so I really feel like the mission is not gone, but the structure may not be effective at this point. And given that, I think the best thing place can do is not dissolve. I'm sorry, I don't mean mothball it, but to I think, take on a moment of researching what some alternatives are, bringing in people locally as well as regionally who have insight into this or who might be partners, and then reconvening when appropriate to present our findings, doing the research that we need to do, just like Place did research on green infrastructure or on complete streets with Main Street. Our research is on how do you have community engaged placemaking, and let's find some models. And we can discuss that, and it may be something that ultimately is more outside of the city, but interfaces with the city. But I think place can exist as an opening to have these discussions in a city context, so that the city knows what's happening. And I feel really okay with that. I mean, personally, that we'll come back. Let's imagine in 3 months or something like that with an agenda that maybe brings in the right people from CCI or from the Equity Center, as well as maybe people from outside, to actually inform a discussion or something like that on a new model. And if that's not appropriate, we won't do it, basically. And then Alex will talk and we'll make decisions about what to do next.
Yeah, I think, on that note, I think it's a pretty good recommendation. If you guys put maybe 3, 4, or 5 individuals, or even 3, 5 might be too much, and charge them with the responsibility of looking into a new model, and give them timeline, like you said, 60 days, 90 days to come back with the recommendation. And then we go through it, and take it from there. I think it's a good idea.
All right, guys, can I throw a wrench in this whole thing, maybe? Or maybe it's just a useful, framework to think about. All right, so, if I were saying, if we had already said, if we could take a vote today, and said place is going to become this thing, which is a brain trust where we form ad hoc committees out of it. And, the big list of experts starts with the 17 people we have now. And, we broaden the net from there. But the first project that I would think would be the obvious ad hoc committee, given the expertise and experience of everyone on here right now. And, maybe this is just to think about how the framework might be organized so that could come into being. But, I'm sure you all have seen that West Main Street is kind of on the brink. Council's like, we can't afford it. The budget is looking pretty bad. I haven't really seen any of this yet. I've just watched the council meetings. What I would think, and it obviously depends how that actually plays out, but like, if they do end up ditching it, then, maybe the question becomes like, how do we accomplish some of the core goals of that, of making a more pedestrian friendly corridor that like has sidewalks wide enough to get around the utility poles, and with safe bike facilities. And how do we do that like really on the cheap? Like, let's take $500,000 absolute most and get buckets of green paint and curb extensions. And like, I feel like we can accomplish a lot of the goals. It's not going to be really the awesome, like super cool, like renders we see in the plan, yet. Maybe eventually we'll get back to that. But in the short term, for the next decade, how can we make it a street that works? And toss a little bit of resources at it and see what that would look like. And I mean, to me, I think like the committee, given that, West Main is really well within our wheelhouse, it's going to be hard to part with some of the nicer things we were hoping for when it was a $50 million project. But I think the downscoping idea might be within the purview of the first ad hoc brain trust concept.
And let me jump on that a second, not meaning to speak at all for council, because we have not talked about this, except to express dismay at what I would regard as appalling cost of what we're seeing for the West Main Streetscape program, to go to what amounts to $70 million a mile. It's tough to reconcile with the rest of the things we're trying to do in the city.
Yeah.
And if there were, and I will tell you right now, there is no expertise on council to do anything more analytical about it, other than to say $70 million a mile is a hell of a lot of money. And if there were a group, and if the planning commission would think of sort of commissioning the place task force to become a group that could consider what a scaled down version of West Main might look like. I mean, that could be a very useful exercise, because like I say, at the council level, we don't have the expertise or the ability, the time, or anything else to try to figure that out more analytically. We're going to be relying entirely on staff work from NDS, from people who would feed into NDS, from the planning commission, from the tree commission and bike ped and everybody else. All those interests come together at the place task force.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes important to get it out of the scope of a city-run organization too, because I know Navarre at least is itching to get out there with some paint and, like, you know, guerrilla bullards and do some tactical urbanism. So
I can neither confirm nor deny that. So
no, that's actually, you're right. This is well within the expertise of place. It's well within the mission of place. That's absolutely true. That we should be calling, an event around incremental, low cost interventions on urban streets, that specifically West Main Street, what can be done. I think there are a lot of people exactly like that in the community who would be able to contribute to that. So, maybe that's a good point. Maybe we should, I don't know where it's at in terms of decision making, in terms of funding, but it seems like.
I'll tell you where it is right now. We're going to have a meeting tonight where we're going to begin the process of council's involvement in the upcoming budget. And that is going to include CIP, and it's going to include operating budget. And we are trying to figure out, if we do West Main Street, does that mean we can't do the schools? If we do the schools, does that mean we can't do West Main Street? What are the choices? What are the trade-offs? The one thing that's clear is we don't have if we figure $50 million for West Main Streetscape, and of course it's not all local money, but still, plus $50 million for schools, plus presumably some other capital needs for the city over the coming years, and we run out of bonding capacity in about 3 years. Okay. We got about 3 or 4 more years during which we could write bonds or sell bonds at the rate we have sold them in the last couple of years. That doesn't get us through school renovations if we're also doing the West Main Streetscape. So we are about to be in a position where we're going to be, say, by February, we're going to be, frankly, a little panicky about how we're going to be able to make some better decisions about this. And if there is a way to scale back some of them, I just speaking for myself, but having a sense that it also, in this respect, I'd get a fair amount of agreement from other counselors. We'd love to have some alternatives.
Okay. Well, then I think under the auspices of the existing place, I mean, we're going to pursue how place operates, but even within that, I mean, Navarre or anyone, do you already have an idea of maybe somebody who would be a perfect facilitator for a charrette on West Main Street, and that, we can hold it under the auspices of what place can do, which is kind of call an event like this in a time of, critical need for a specific issue. We need somebody who's, I'm not a designer, so I wouldn't, even though I do transportation planning, I'm not a charrette leader. So we would want to find that person and then call people to the table, basically, for an event.
Let me interrupt for 1 second.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You all have, and Andrew, certainly you have that experience, and I certainly would think that a charrette would be a good way to go. But as I recall, as I interpret what we are doing, what council has now done, we are basically saying this is in the ballpark of NDS
Yes.
to coordinate. And so Alex, you as the representative of NDS here, I mean, I think I would say to you, you know, maybe you want to think about what it would look like if you were to do something like this and to make a proposal either to the planning commission or to the city manager or to city council or something. I want to make clear that council, and certainly one councilor, has no power to go commissioning people to go do things. But that I would express to you, Alex, the belief that this is perhaps a useful way that you, as the, you know, that your department could deputize these folks to go out and do something we might like to see done. So I will leave it at that. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do.
That's well heard. Yeah.
Is this in relationship to West Main?
Yes.
I think, you know, we did the alignment, you know, department alignment, and the West Main project now has been shifted to Public Works.
This is the problem. So
yeah, so it's been a while. I used to lead that project, you know, so for
all the more reason for play.
Almost
Yeah.
9 months now or something like that. I've been removed from the project, but your point is well taken. I can communicate with the Public Works Director.
So, I mean, this is where I feel like the city, this whole thing being under the auspices of the city, given, I'm not going to say that, it's just going to be better to be independent. Like, you know, what I was thinking was like, you set up a walking tour, you know, we all walk West Main. You know, actually, I know some people who are talking about a walking tour of West Main anyway, you know, some like walking and biking advocates. And you know, you have some architects or engineers or whatever, and everyone just kind of says like, look there, like it makes no sense for that not to be a sidewalk extension. Or I get to stand in front of the standard and say, why is this bike lane exactly parking width and with no barriers, and there's always cars parked there? Maybe at least paint it green and put up some freaking rubber bollards. But like, you know, if we make it under NDS and try to make it like a comprehensive plan, lowercase, that's going to it's going to spiral out of control again, and we're going to end up with a maybe not quite $50 million project, and then nothing's going to happen. But if we can say, here are like 10 really small things that you could do like within the existing public works budget, or like if you toss a little bit into a CIP account for this, you know, some productive conversations to get something moving and incrementally improving, and then we can build off that from there.
Yeah, I think my word charrette is not to say it's any one thing in particular. I'm just saying that you know, fundamentally, it's an opportunity for people who know how this works to get together and to say, oh, between 4th Street and 7th Street or whatever, you know, this is the section that could be done with some paint and whatever. Between 4th and whatever, between 4th and Ridge McIntyre, do this. I mean, they're, you know, and just come up with some good recommendations, I think, and then present it, you know, then say, here, you know, present it to NDS and Public Works and, you know, whoever else wants to listen, and say, you could do this now. I think it just needs to be called. You know, if it's not within place's purview, I think what we're saying is an independent place would just do that. I think, you know, but we can do it now too, because we can. I mean, we can set our agendas and you know, call people to do things, but you know, call people for the purposes of meetings. I don't think it has to be tied into our regular meeting schedule. I'm just saying we can help. We can help organize this. We know people.
Agreed. And it initially, you know, because there's so much going on with West Main, because of how much has been invested in it, because it's pretty complex to understand the budget, you know, the first step to an ad hoc group of us taking that on would be to make sure that we understand what's going on. The idea of hiring a facilitator to me sounds scary and probably not the right way to go, because so many of these facilitated discussions are kind of asking people what their hopes and dreams are. And then you get sort of specialized interests of bicyclists and others who are begin, advocating for their single issue. I would love to have someone brief me on, the overall budget, and these key issues of undergrounding utilities or utilities that are defunct, or what we're actually dealing with, maybe on a typical block for one block of it, and sort of figure out what the guerrilla tactics might actually be, just to kind of understand it and think about it, because I don't want to open my mouth until I really have a sense of kind of what, like, I don't need to understand how it got this way, but I do need to understand, if I were involved in it, what all we're hoping to have happen and what we would give up. Because, there's a lot of stuff I would give up to support the schools. We need to think like, we need to channel whatever we would do design wise, imagining that we're Lloyd, or imagining we're council trying to figure out, where the other capital funding is, that we're spending on that. And is it right for our city and our scale in a time like this to be spending money we don't have on stuff that is, would be nice, but probably isn't affordable.
So at what points, Andrew, at what points do you all want to start contemplating on this West Main? Is it after council makes their decision in terms of, okay, we're not gonna do the whole project, we're just gonna do phase one, and let's see what we can do in terms of phases 2, 3, and 4. Let's have a public discussion. So at what point do you wanna start contemplating your involvement in the West Main? I just want to know, so I know what to communicate to Public Works Director.
Well, maybe advise me, please, and Lloyd. How soon are you?
Council is still working on the CIP.
Oh, that's what I
they are still discussing the West Main project. So they haven't really reached a decision whether they're going to continue with the whole project or just do phase 1 or phases 1 and 2. So you guys might want to wait until they make that decision, or you can start preliminary discussion in terms of, okay, what if?
I guess it's one of these questions, and please advise me, Lloyd, and it's one of those questions. If we wait, then obviously the die is cast, and we're dealing with the situation as it is. Or is it better to move quickly and say, here are some options? I don't know the answer to that. That's not.
Or the other thing is like Mark. I think Mark raised an important question. Whether you guys wanna get some kind of overview of the project, maybe get the project manager to come and present the overview of the project. So some of you will get a feel of what the phases are and what's included in each phase, how much is gonna cost, the funding mechanisms and stuff like that. Maybe that would provide some kind of information opportunity for you guys to see what's involved and what some of the issues, funding issues are. And things like that. You want to do that?
So, I think that makes sense, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of that has been presented in the latest council work sessions. That.
I'm talking about the place.
Yeah, I was just gonna say maybe we should just tell everyone to go watch that, but I don't know, maybe it makes sense to go into it in more detail with a two-way conversation instead.
I'm just suggesting, how you folks want to proceed.
I guess the question is do you think that would be a burden on staff to do that? Or
I'm gonna ask, I'm just throwing it out there, because Mark raised an important question. If before he can do anything, he wants to have some kind of a full information, so I was just volunteering because I still have to ask Public Works. Here is what I heard at the Place Design Task Force meeting. They want an overview, of the project. Just in case the council decides it's not going to complete the whole stretch. They are looking to do some analysis or whatever it is that place is going to do. So are you guys going to be available to provide an overview in the form of presentation?
Information is always valuable. I think I would be hard pressed to say no to that. I think that could be useful. I mean, Mark, what do you think?
I think it'd be valuable, but I also think that if there are other tools out there, a video Rory referred to, or the briefing packet that council got, that we really owe it to whoever it would be talking to us from staff to do our homework in advance of that. Because I don't really want to have a monthly meeting where I'm going in cold and don't know anything about Main Street and I'm finally learning it. I would want to study it first. Because we would want that to possibly be, we want to come up with good questions to ask about the process too.
Yeah, I think.
I'm sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there was a briefing to City Council about, I don't know exactly, about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can provide that information or link
to
that particular video.
Yeah.
That would be great. Even if you could just point us to where we should look for those materials, that would be fantastic. And then Mark and maybe Navarre, I see Navarre, your camera's off, but I mean,
yeah, my connection got a little unstable there, so I turned it off.
No worries at all. But I think or anyone, I mean, it could be anybody, I would love if one or two of us, just help decide what is the right format, because clearly, I'm not sure what the right format is for a collaborative kind of, again, it could be a walk on the street. I don't think that's that's something that actually is feasible, safely distanced with masks on and distance, but to walk down the street and make a set of recommendations after reading the information packet, so to speak. Is that what's right? I don't know. So I'm putting it to you both to either think about.
I mean, I think getting a ground truth for it would be useful, and also having that background information that's already been presented. Like, I think maybe as Mark was saying, like, we're trying to reduce the amount of staff time that's necessary to, we as long as somebody can point us to it, we can at least look at it, see what it is. If we could get out there on the street, I think that's going to give us a better impression of what things are than just looking at pictures. I know that's something we've talked about doing at BPEC for a while. I think we started talking about this probably last November, and then we didn't meet all summer at BPAC. So I think it's still kind of floating out there. But I know some people who are interested in doing it.
Is any design data currently available? Any CAD files like as-built? I mean, would the city share that information?
For West Main?
Yes.
And
the design.
I'm not, well, JJ will probably have something, but Roadside and Howell, is the lead consultant on the project. I'm not sure whether we have a schematic design, design developed, some information on design developed, so we can look into that and see what we have.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Whether it's
north of 3 million for the engineering.
Whether it's public information.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say, I guess I can point you guys to the council work session, or Lloyd probably remembers the date better than me. It was, I believe, the November 20th work session. There isn't really a packet available, but there was a presentation. Honestly, it's just worth watching. It was like an hour and a half of talking about West Main, and it was pretty useful. I'd also add Mr. Tubbs, who is still in the room, but recording and not listening, has written, he's a journalist again. He's written several long form pieces on the West Main project and those work sessions that I would definitely recommend reading to get the recap on both what just happened and the history there. And that might be the like best information to time use of your time for you.
Yes,
but I mean,
I've read that and it's excellent. Everyone on place should actually read Sean's summary because I felt like, all those issues, including the money, were kind of put out there. And yeah.
Definitely. No, I agree with that. I think what I'm just trying to make sure we do right is what is our process then to we get the information. I think towards, Lloyd's statement and Alex's, and ultimately, working to just provide some ideas that whatever happens with the budget, it's like, hey, let's use incremental design principles to just do something now and make it a better place. What's our process for engaging a group of people appropriately to do that? I'm just curious, Mark. I mean, and Navarre said, maybe a walk. Maybe is it something else? I just want to have an idea of what the best way to do it is.
Yeah, I don't have a great idea on sort of what the process should be because I sort of there's money, there's time, in other words, kind of phasing, and then there's our wish list of stuff that involves things that are urgent and have to be done, like utility lines that are broken, and then there's the sort of wants that aren't needs. And I feel like once we sort of parse all of that out, certain things will emerge. Like, what would West Main look like without undergrounding power? What would it look like if we, we need to sort of, we have the luxury of kind of backing up and kind of, would ideally, something like that would take place with a small group with no time constraint, not necessarily a presentation, and just sort of starting to ask some of these questions about, what would make a difference? What's really an effective use of money and space?
Well, yeah, I guess I just understood it maybe a little bit differently in the sense that I wasn't really even thinking of, well, and maybe you're not either, so maybe I'm misunderstanding, but, it's not like, so 70 million, we're going down to 5 million. I'm just thinking like 100,000 of just what can we do now? And just to whatever happens with the budget. So I don't know. I as much as we can learn from the discussions about the big budget, I understood this more in a different way of being like, what can we do that's good for mobility and multimodalism and the quality of the street without actually doing anything that's uses millions of dollars.
Because we do have a sidewalk improvement budget,
right,
that exists, and there's not much money in it, but there is money in it, for instance, and it's probably something on the order of $100,000 or something. Although it was cut in the last CIP, but that's another story for another time. But the money is still there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's 600,000 and change in that account from previous years. They're only adding 100,000. Those are new sidewalks. There's a little more for existing sidewalks. Of course, there's a lot to be done all over the city. But my impression, I think, would be that if council gets to save 50 million in bonding authority, they're not going to be too freaked out about using a couple 100,000 maybe to, accomplish a lot or, a chunk of the goals that they, from that decade long, sort of design and community outreach project. But yeah, I mean, ultimately what it looks like without undergrounding power lines and such is exactly what it looks like now, because absolutely nothing's going to happen except for the absolutely necessary utility work that sounds like staff is just going to kind of do anyway in a different timeline. And it would be cool. Don't get me wrong. I think being able to have a conversation with staff to get information and to, really have a two-way conversation and see if there's synergies and efficiencies that might be gained of doing stuff at the same time as that utility work would be good, because it sounds like at this point, there's really no plan for any of that. But yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we're looking at basically nothing happening. And again, I don't actually know what council's going to do, but if that's the outcome, like being able to say, all right, well, what if we just ditch, there's no underground utilities, there's no Silva cells, you gotta leave the existing trees. How can we at least take like the segments of sidewalk where it's not even wide enough to pass because the utility is, and like put a curb extension around it? How can we take the bike lanes that people are talking or parking in and make them a little more useful, all like super on the cheap? Like that's really what I was imagining.
A lot of that's going to be development driven, and actually you could integrate it into some of those costs.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
I'm unfortunately going to have to sign off. I was on a deadline. It was a reason I'm late, and I'm starting to get too much anxiety to stay on the call anymore.
But that's fine. Yeah, so I think we're going to adjourn here anyway, here in just a second. I think, so Mark, just as you're going, I think, I think we have two things to move forward with. You know, one is the investigation of alternatives for what place could look like using good examples from elsewhere and ideas about what it could be. I think that actually, I'm excited about that. The other one is what can we do about West Main? And what I really would ask, and I'll just send out a request, is some proposals for how we might move forward on that. Because I didn't actually hear consensus on that. And I would love to have a set of ideas of how we can do that so that, yeah, we can just provide some good ideas that could be readily actionable to show that West Main, you know, is still important to the city, even though, yeah, it's not something that, you know, maybe is a trade-off with the school's remodeling budget. So I think it's something that we can do, because that's actually, with, like you said, within our wheelhouse. So we just have to have a process that is going to generate that. So I'd love to hear some ideas about that. So I'll send out an email about it, but just to ask for ideas. And, you know, if Sean's listening, which I imagine he is, and to ask for ideas from others as well. So that's it. So I'm going to close. Well, do we agree that it's probably, I think we've done it. We've done what we can do for today.
Yes.
Okay, then I'm going to open it up to public comment. If anyone would like to make public comment.
If you'd like to speak for this last public comment, please press the raise hand option on the Zoom toolbar.
Listening, Sean, talking about you.
A lot.
Sean has not raised his hand, so we have no public comments.
All right. Well, this was I thought we did a lot for a little. So yeah.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
As you send this out, the next briefing. I mean, the idea of sort of a group of us meeting on site, you know, just to sort of talk about this is good. However, we can do that within our guidelines of meeting and scheduling a meeting. Maybe consider throwing that out there and trying to get a date on the calendar.
I'll follow up on that, whether it's a place thing or not. Yeah. You know, either it will be a place thing or it won't be a place thing, and I'll follow up on that.
Right. Okay.
Also, something to keep in mind, communications will not be hosting for a place anymore. It will be NDS staff that will be, if there's going to be a meeting, so we're going to have just something to be aware of as you go forward in terms of scheduling a meeting. That it will be NDS staff that will have to do the hosting. All right.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, we'll talk to Carrie and Alex about how that process might work. So that sounds great.
Right.
It's all good for me. So yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good luck with everything.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.